So, in my last video, I reviewed a story featuring a 26-year-old man sheltering a 17-year-old girl. I noted that I was a bit uncomfortable with things, but it was broadly well received, so for this review, I thought I'd push the envelope a bit further. Today, I'll be reviewing a story about a 15-year-old guy dating a 27-year-old woman. What could go wrong? Ladies and gentlemen, may I present my review of Are You Okay with a Slightly Older Girlfriend? Or, as I would like to title it for my audience, Are You Okay with a Slightly Larger Age Gap? All jokes aside, a large part of Are You Okay with a Slightly Older Girlfriend is actually surprisingly wholesome. It starts with our protagonist, Momota, saving a high school girl, Orihara, from being molested on a train. The two exchange numbers, go on a date, hit it off, and by the end of their first date, Momota is already so in love that he confesses. His confession goes poorly, but not because of the whole "we've only known each other for a couple of days, this is way too fast" thing that you might expect. Rather, it's because, surprise, Orihara is actually 12 years older than Momota, and for various reasons had been wearing a high school uniform when she met him. It's a long story. Anyways, Orihara recognizes that it would probably be irresponsible of her to date a high schooler, but Momota isn't good at taking no for an answer. So, with the help of his friends, he sets up a second proposal, calls Orihara out, and confesses to her again. But this time in the sweetest, most romantic, straight out of a book Prince Charming way possible. And this time, she says yes. The main body of this story then is watching Momota and Orihara stumbling their way through what is our first relationship for both of them, while also dealing with all the issues that arise from their ever so slight age gap. Now, obviously there are some ethical issues with this relationship, and I'll address those later in this video. Of any two characters with an age gap you could put together, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better set than Momota and Orihara. Momota looks old enough to easily pass as a university student despite still being in high school, and his personality matches his outward appearance. He's serious, honest, and way more dependable than I ever was as a high schooler. I mean, hell, when Orihara misses a date with him because she has to work late, his response is to go over to her place, cook dinner, and greet her with a meal on the table when she gets back. If that doesn't scream mature and dependable, I don't know what does. Orihara, on the other hand, has enough of a baby face that she can easily pass for a high schooler, and while generally being a respectable adult, she definitely has some immaturities. She's gloriously nerdy, and has about as much romantic experience as Momota, which is to say none before their relationship. As such, their relationship feels like one of equals, which is always the biggest concern with couples like this, aside from, angry parents and legal issues. Sure, Momota worries about not being able to pay his fair share in the relationship, and Orihara worries about spoiling the mood when she's with some of Momota's friends, but they're able to work through these issues by talking them out. Outside of Momota and Orihara, there's two other characters I'd like to highlight. Momota's friend Ura is a nerdy introvert, and while his commentary is often biting, he's really a huge softie. Later, Busiki, a female classmate of theirs, starts taking an interest in him. His tsundere side comes out even more, making for some of the funniest parts of the story so far. Ibusuki, meanwhile, is straightforward, no-nonsense, and blunt. She initially had a thing for Momota, but upon realizing he was taken, blessedly decides not to turn this story into a harem. Rather, she sees a glint of kindness below Ura's mopey facade and starts prying him out of his shell. This process is yet to be complete, but I have high hopes and am enjoying the side romance almost as much as the main one. Aside from the whole age gap thing, I would actually say that Are You Okay with a Slightly Older Girlfriend does a surprisingly good job portraying a healthy relationship. It is head and shoulders above most other light novels in this area, especially when it comes to two key building blocks of relationships: communication and respect. Let's start with communication. A common hallmark of both romantic comedies and dramas is that the characters just won't freaking talk things out. This leads to misunderstandings, which then drives the comedy and or drama, but also delays progress. In this story, meanwhile, while Orihara and Momota do have misunderstandings, they are very good communicating their feelings openly and honestly with each other. Sure, they'll hurt each other's feelings occasionally, or do something stupid, but they always talk things out in a timely manner and put in a real effort to make amends. As such, they grow closer as a couple, coming to understand each other better in a natural manner. Now, as for respect, I could easily see this being a stumbling block for the story, given the different stages of life of the two protagonists. However, this is not an issue. Despite the fact that Momota is much younger than Orihara, Orihara never infantilizes him and makes a concerted effort not to make money a big deal so it can be a relationship of equals. Likewise, Momota respects Orihara's boundaries. He doesn't push her to do anything she's not comfortable with, and is quick to reassure her that it's fine to go at whatever pace she's comfortable with. He respects her career, even when dealing with her different schedules, makes it difficult to get time together, and he also makes a concerted effort to get into some of her more dated interests, instead of making light of them. There's loads of other examples, but generally they both admire each other and try in their own bumbling ways to treat each other right. The bumbling then brings us to the other selling point of this series, the comedy. Older Girlfriend is hilarious and draws on a lot of awkwardness of early dating to mine for comedy gold. There's a lot of pretty ridiculous situations you can get into with your first relationship, and the 12-year age gap just increases this number. Some of the resulting humor comes from schadenfreude, some from absurdities, some from slapstick, but all of it was executed well. Neither the rom nor the com is lacking in this series. The over-endowment of female characters is something that seems to get some people quite upset. Personally, I don't mind that much, other than wondering how some characters' backs haven't been broken by the melons they have strapped to their chest. And I really don't want to get into a debate about character design. As such, I'll just mention that Orihara has inhumanly large breasts and move on. Or at least I would, if the author would stop bringing it up. Seriously. By and large, this series is not ecchi focused, but the author can't seem to stop talking about Orihara's breasts, to the point that it often detracts from the rest of the story. The main problem is that the author doesn't really know how to write fanservice relating to breasts. The only thing we get from him is confirmation, over and over again, that yes, indeed, Orihara's chest is large. And oh, look how embarrassed Momota and Orihara are over it. I mean, it's not that the author can't write fanservice, period, and that brings us to our next problem. You see, while Orihara and Momota remain virgins thus far in the story, and I pray it remains that way until Momota is legal, Momota and Orihara have had more physical contact than is probably appropriate given Momota's age. Also, they have come far too close to having sex on several occasions. While I don't have issues with illegal activities occurring in books, I mean, hell, you'd have to ban everything from Harry Potter to the Bible if you banned depictions of murder in books, I think there's an issue with how said activities are portrayed. The more physical side of Momota and Orihara's relationship is portrayed in a somewhat sympathetic light, which raises a few red flags for me. At the moment, the author has been walking a very fine line, such that to my very limited understanding of Japanese consent laws, nothing illegal has occurred. But I'd very much appreciate if he would take a couple of steps away from the line. I'm sure there are probably a fair few people who noped out as soon as they heard the premise of this story, which is totally fair. That being said, I think Older Girlfriend is a pretty decent story. If you're interested in a more mature romantic comedy than what you would typically see in light novels, then I would say it's worth a try. God, I hope the author doesn't write anything in future volumes that makes me regret saying that. Anyways, if you've already read this series and are looking for something similar, I would recommend Watakoi, a similarly mature romantic comedy about otaku office workers dating. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed the review. Cheers!